Hello and welcome to another episode of Scott Reads Comics. Today we'll be looking at Solo Avengers number 3. This one starring Hawkeye and Moon Knight. This was published in 1988 and it features a great cover by Bob Hall and Stan Drake, who are the artists for the second feature in this book. I love these sort of split covers. Marvel and DC both have a history of publishing every now and then a cover that sort of has disparate story elements presented on it, separated by shapes, or in this case we have a diagonal line sort of going across the cover, almost bisecting it. But looks like the top 2/3 are Hawkeye battling Batroc, and then the bottom third is a really cool, visually cool matchup between the Shroud and Moon Knight. And before this particular issue, I don't think these characters had ever met. So it will be very interesting once we get to that part of our story. But we start with the Hawkeye feature. And Stan Lee proudly presents the continuing saga of the world's greatest archer, Hawkeye. And our credits for this part of the issue written with style by Tom DeFalco, penciled with drama by Mark D. Bright, inked with precision by Joseph Rubinstein, lettered with love by Jack Morelli, colored with care by Ken Fedukowicz, edited with a 2x4, Mark Grunwald. All right. So, very interesting, cool splash page here. As an aside, I love Mark Bright's artwork, and he was a workhorse at Marvel for many years, and really doesn't get the credit that he deserves as an artist. A phenomenal artist, great master of the Marvel house style, and we're going to see that on display in this issue here, inked by the estimable Joe Rubinstein. Blast, Hawkeye thinks. I've been on the defensive ever since this battle began, and things are going from bad to worse. I've been shooting my arrows faster than I can aim, just to keep these guys off my... Yikes! He dodges those daggers there. So this story begins with a classic writer's instrument and media race in the middle. So we'll figure out what's going on as we go. And as he dodges those knives, and we'll see who those were thrown by, we can see a familiar figure here in the background coming out at him with a flying kick. You are slowing down, mon ami, burning out. You barely managed to dodge those sighs, and you certainly won't avoid me, but Hawkeye does. Want to bet, Pally? I heard you coming a mile off, and can easily roll beneath your clumsy attack. Archery may be my specialty, but I also took combat lessons from Captain America himself. Nice sequencing of panels on this page, too. There's a lot of flowing action in this fight scene, and we're going to see Mark Bright, his skills as a layout artist really shine in this sequence here. So Hawkeye, long one of my favorite Avengers, doesn't really have any powers, but he is a superhumanly accurate archer with plenty of gadget arrows. So he springs out of the way of Batroc's attack, springs up, and then Batroc is suddenly gone from his sight until he springs back and does a patented double kick. Not gone, mon ami. I was merely placing myself into the proper position to deliver your death blow and bring a dramatic close to the adventures of... And then we have our title, An American Archer in Paris. Almost a second splash page here with this half page. Very cool Parisian cityscape here as Hawkeye is knocked out into open space. And we see that Batroc is not alone. He has brought the other members of Batroc's brigade, Machete and Zarin the Weapon Master. So also themselves colorful villains and favorites of mine. I would put them in the lower tier villain of Marvel hierarchy of villains, but I'm drawn to those sorts of characters. Probably why I love the Suicide Squad from DC so much. So Hawkeye is plummeting to his death, but he shoots a grapple arrow, and unerringly he hits his mark and saves himself. And now he's flat against the building, and they're still throwing knives at him, Zarin's knives. Uh-oh, more knives. Looks like another fine mess I've got myself into. Guess I just don't live right. Unbidden, images suddenly flood Hawkeye's mind as he recalls the events that led him to this perilous position. And so now we're going to have a quick flashback to figure out what happened. Why is Hawkeye in Paris? Barely 24 hours ago, he was still in Los Angeles at West Coast Avengers headquarters when you received a one-way ticket to Paris from Trickshot, your former mentor? Hawk, that man vowed to kill you. This is obviously some kind of death challenge. Obviously, Hawk says to his wife, Mockingbird. You can't possibly accept. No way, but I can cash in my ticket and take my beautiful wife to dinner with the proceeds. Promise, she asks. I promise already. But you can see, as they're embracing, Hawkeye has something else up his sleeve, and Mockingbird is wise to him. You're a lying, two-faced cheat. I heard you slip that gas arrowhead out of your tunic. You don't understand, babe. Of course I do. I know just how your devious mind works. Macho pride is forcing you to accept that ridiculous challenge. Used a few bad throws to distract her so that I could, and then you see Hawkeye as she's somersaulting into a new position. He drops a gas cartridge right in her path, and she inhales the fumes and is knocked unconscious, and he leaves her lying comfortably in the bed there. I don't know. For a marriage of like theirs, eventually I know it ends badly later on for other reasons, but this couldn't have been a good building block in a newer marriage, But Hawkeye is who he is. He's a rather bullheaded individual. And he says that so much himself. I feel like such a heel, he thinks, as he's flying over to Paris in this 747. The uneventful trip took a total of 22 hours, including a 1-hour layover in Chicago and the 9-hour time difference between Los Angeles and Paris. So Hawkeye arrives, not unobserved here, at the Parisian airport. He's in his hotel now, and he notices someone just slipped an envelope under my door. And it contained a single picture of the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So this battle is taking place, this opening battle is taking place at the Notre Dame Cathedral, which is pretty cool. You can see the gargoyles there. All right, so Hawkeye shows up there, and then the fight ensues. And here we are back in the present, and he is hanging precariously from the building, and Zarin, it looks like, Zarin uses his polearm here and cuts Hawkeye's line. Monsieur Trickshot sends his regrets. He couldn't be here, so he sent us. I recognize these three, and I wish I didn't. Batroc the Leaper, Zarin the Weapon Master, and Machete the King of Knives. And where's Trickshot? It's not like him to use hired help on a personal vendetta. Oh well, guess I can't worry about that now. So Hawkeye's trying to finagle away off the side of Notre Dame Cathedral, and someone's watching the battle from afar. The American appears to be in a hopeless position. Should we move in? No, I have heard that he is very resourceful, this figure in the middle replies. So here Hawkeye finagles some kind of secondary rope onto this gargoyle. Meanwhile, Zarin is lowering Machete down to see if he can spot him. Can you see him, Machete? What is the bloody fool doing now? He is crazy, Zarin. Muy loco. He's using his remaining arrow line to swing to that nearby rooftop, and Hawkeye, swashbuckler that he is, makes it look easy. Logic says I should keep running, but no one's ever confused me with Mr. Spock. I can't just leave Paris until I've found Trick and finally settled things between us. And Batroc fearlessly runs across the slack line over to Hawkeye, and their battle continues here. Nice 6-panel arrangement here from Mark Bright, also known as Doc Bright in some circles and on some credit pages. Cool 6 equally sized panels which nicely move the action forward here as Batroc swings in or leaps in his inimitable style and then somersaults over Hawkeye as Hawkeye misses him with yet another arrow. I've got a flash for you, pal. Your leap was way off target. It was meant to be. I was merely cutting off your escape route. And nice here is Batroc lands and then bounces. Batroc was into parkour before parkour was fashionable. I was just trying to get you in a little, trying to get in a little sightseeing before I flatten you and your heavy-footed friends. And here he takes Machete out with what looks like a gas arrow. And And Zarin says, "It's a pity that I have moved in much too close for your bow and arrows to be of any use now." He's getting ready to take it to Hawkeye, and he does. But Hawkeye uses his bow itself as a melee weapon, hitting Zarin in the midsection. And Batroc springs back into action to help his partner. "I'm impressed, Avenger. You seem more than a match for my two bumbling associates. But what do you intend to do about me?" "Well, I could buy a pogo stick to keep up with you, or I could just settle on using this handy little maneuver which Captain America taught me. It's crude, but effective." Again, another Cap name drop. Hawkeye was trained in melee combat by Cap, and so it's really holding him in good stead here. He uses his double kick to send Batroc over his head into this chimney. Zarin's recovered, and he shouts, "Enough! We have suffered enough pain and humiliation at your hands." "Keep it down, will you?" Hawkeye replies. "I'd hate to be accused of assassin abuse." Nice little repartee there from writer Tom DeFalco. And the observers are continuing to watch. "This is starting to get out of hand. Perhaps you should interfere now." "No, let them finish," the mysterious third person says again. This time we can see clearly it's a woman. We can see the stiletto heel and the dress in her silhouette. "What's with you guys?" Hawkeye asks. "Don't you know you're supposed to be unconscious after a hero clobbers you? It's in your union contract." And so Hawkeye here takes Zarin out with what looks like might be some kind of adhesive arrow. Batroc takes that opening to double kick, flying mule kick Hawkeye down through this skylight into this room. Meanwhile, back up on the roof, the three observers have come closer to the action. "Look, they crashed into the restaurant below, and Hawkeye lost his bow." "Don't worry, he is an Avenger," our still silhouetted third observer says, "and won't allow any innocents to be harmed." So these three are concerned about the harm of innocents. In this great panel here, we see Batroc with a pair of flaming shish kebabs. He'll use whatever he can to try to take Hawkeye out. Meanwhile, Hawkeye, without his bow, has to improvise. "Mind if I get a little nibble from that shish kebab first? I'm famished. If you're going to eat with your fingers, I insist you use a napkin." So he whips the tablecloth off this nearby table and uses it to distract Batroc. But Batroc quickly backhands him. "Stop it. Stop trying to make a fool of me." "Why? Would you rather do it yourself?" Hawkeye replies. And he thinks to himself, it's obvious these Frenchmen haven't seen many costume clowns mix it up. They don't know enough to clear out. So he's worried that the people in the restaurant are still just sort of standing around walking, so he wants to move the fight to another spot. Batroc misconstrues what he did. "You thought to escape me, mon ami?" "Nope, just wanted to get away from all that fancy food before I was tempted to go off my diet." Okay, so now they're in some back alley here outside of the building. And Hawkeye just goes into close quarters with him, and they trade blows. Uppercut here. Batroc comes back with a well-placed headbutt. Then he tries to move in for a haymaker, and Hawkeye lays one on him. Great panel here. Boom, across the panel there, across the page. That panel stretches nicely. And Hawkeye KOs Batroc. Whew, he thinks. Guess all those years of tugging that bowstring has really paid off in upper body strength. "Hawkeye!" someone shouts from off panel. "Now what?" he thinks. Who are you?" "My name is Silver Sable, and I arrest you in the name of France for the cold-blooded murder of the costumed adventurer known as Trickshot." "What?" And we have a to be continued. So it turns out that for whatever reason, Silver Sable hired these three members of Batroc's brigade to distract or bring Hawkeye close to her so she could arrest him, apparently for the murder of his erstwhile mentor, Trickshot, who is now his nemesis, and the reason why he is in France. So we will see in Solo Avengers number 4 what becomes of Hawkeye. Meanwhile, we're going to move on here. Letters page, cool John Byrne, Hawkeye floating head there. This is early in Solo Avengers, number 3, so there weren't any letters on the previous 2 issues because of the lag time. But editor Mark Grunwald had asked in a previous book that he was working on or editing for people to write in their thoughts about editors. So a number of people wrote in and talk about how they see the role and benefit of editors in comics. Interesting, but nothing really worth dwelling on for too long. So we'll just move on to our second feature, which is Moon Knight, in a tale titled Tower of Shadows. Roger Stern is the writer, Bob Hall the penciler, Stan Drake inker, Jack Morelli letterer, and Paul Becton colorist. Note, this story takes place before events shown in West Coast Avengers 29. So at this point, Moon Knight has recently joined the West Coast Avengers. And before I go too further, a quick remark on the art team here. Just like Mark Bright was a stalwart Marvel house guy, Bob Hall inhabits much of the same space. Maybe not as prolific as Mark Bright was, but Bob Hall worked on a ton of titles, Avengers, Champions. He did a number of, I think, Marvel team-ups and Marvel 2-in-1s. Never a super long run on any one book, but a lot of work for Marvel over the years, and just a solid artist and layout guy. And his inker, Stan Drake, is another interesting story. An older guy at this point. This book was published in '88. Stan Drake would go on to pass away in 1997, so not that long after this. He was born, I believe, in 27, and had a really interesting career as a cartoonist for newspaper strips. And interestingly, in 1956, he was in the same car that crashed and killed Flash Gordon, artist extraordinaire Alex Raymond. He survived, though, was badly injured in the wreck. So Stan Drake, a great artist in his own right here, and one who is a little older at the time of this publication, but still doing great work as an inker. So here we are with Moon Knight. What was it Shakespeare wrote? All the world's a stage? Yeah. And one man in his time plays many parts. In my time, I've been a boxer, a mercenary, and a millionaire. I've driven cabs, and I've dealt in fine art. Who'd have thought I'd end up playing hero? I've used a lot of names in my life. The one I answer to most is the one my father gave me, Mark Spector. Except when I'm duded up in my skin tights and cape, then I call myself Moon Knight. Funny the things that run through your mind when you're thousands of feet in the air. So here he is. He has taken a glider out of his patented helicopter here, flown by his associate Frenchie, and he is gliding down toward this weird-looking LA mountaintop mansion or mini castle. Just days before I joined the Avengers, arguably the world's foremost group of heroes. So why was I doing my Lone Ranger number again? Because of a fellow named Cornelius Van Lunt. Van Lunt was a would-be criminal mastermind who'd given my new partners plenty of grief, and he was still at large, and I was looking for information on his whereabouts. So Van Lunt is also a member of the one of the iterations of the Zodiac, a group of super criminals based on the 12 signs of the Zodiac. And I believe he was Taurus in the Zodiac. So Moon Knight's trying to help his new teammates out by tracking Van Lunt down and taking him out. He has few connections in LA, but one of them is Jack Russell, who is also the werewolf by night. And Russell tells him that the only lead that he can give him is to go to this weird old mansion, seaside mansion, and try to get information from the crime boss who lives there, who is known as the Shroud. So at this point in the Marvel Universe continuity, the Shroud is a superhero, but he pretends to be a villain, so he kind of plays both sides so he can take the underworld out from within. But that does result in some misunderstandings. And at this point, Moon Knight and the Shroud have never met, as I mentioned earlier, so this will be interesting visually and story-wise. I also hoped I could persuade this crime boss to talk. His kind are notoriously uncooperative around people in my line of work. Luckily, I wasn't that well known on the West Coast. Maybe I could spook him by sneaking up on him unannounced. So here, Moon Knight makes entrance into the castle. From somewhere outside came a sound. I could have sworn it was a cross between a belly laugh and the howl of a wolf. It made me wonder just where Russell was tonight, and if I was wrong to trust him so soon before a full moon. So when Jack Russell transforms into Werewolf by Night, he isn't always able to control himself. So that's what Moon Knight is musing about here. I know I shouldn't let these things get to me. After all, I'm as much a creature of the night as Russell is. Still, there was something about the place that set my nerves on edge. So nice shot here of Moon Knight coming in this cross-shaped window and kind of walking down these stairs. Solid layout and artwork here by Hall and Drake. And as one might expect with a creepy mansion like this, there are traps. Good thing, really, that booby track could have triggered automatically, but I've got the sinking feeling it wasn't. So these spikes narrowly miss him. He gets out of the way, but falls off the side of the stairs. My feelings weren't all that were sinking. The floor of the tower still lay several stories beneath me, and while I could probably survive the fall without injury, I saw no need to take further chances. So he uses his incredible agility to land on these gargoyles and then spring off of them. And he'll explain to us later that he had, based on his deal with the Egyptian god Honshu, he has powers that wax and wane with the, just like almost like Jack Russell, the powers that wax and wane with the phases of the moon. So at a near full moon, he has superhuman strength and endurance, and to some lesser extent, probably a little bit of superhuman agility. I was about a second away from a most ungraceful landing when a trapdoor opened, giving me just enough time to get my feet under me again. As I rebounded through a mass of phony theatrical spiderwebs, I began to think I'd been set up. But why? By whom? So here he is with these, he's landed next to these suits of knight's armor, and we know that's not going to end well. The heads all turn in unison and shoot darts at him. I caught a glimpse of a liquid on the tips of the darts as they flashed by. Could have been an anesthetic drug or a hallucinogen or something lethal. But they don't touch him. He uses his wristbands to deftly deflect them. And then his super strength, he hurls this massive wooden chair into them to take them out. But the man behind all this, him, I definitely wanted a part of. Several parts, preferably. So he gets through a few more traps. Again, definitely avoiding them with his experience and agility. And finally, he's had enough. That does it. I've had enough. Show yourself. Face me like a man. Sure, it was a stupid macho challenge. I just hoped my opponent was stupid and macho enough to fall for it. And does the Shroud? Well, it looks like he does. In an awesome panel here, maybe the best in this story, the Shroud materializes out of the darkness. The echoes of my challenge had just died out when something across the room began to move. I'd have sworn he wasn't there a moment before. He just melted out of the shadows. You have entered my tower of shadows unbidden, and so you must face my judgment, the judgment of the Shroud. So here, Moon Knight hurls a hatchet at him, perhaps letting his rage get the best of him, because if he actually connects with that hatchet, he's not going to get much information from him. But to no avail. I'd meant to pin his cape to the wall, but you only think you know the dark, Moon Knight, but I am its master. So he wasn't trying to kill him here. He was trying to pin his cape to the wall. But still, a bit dangerous of a strategy. I couldn't have taken more than a second to react, but in that time, he was gone again. I love his Moon Knight's little Egyptian-themed crescent darts that he throws. Very cool. Moon Knight is basically a kind of a Marvel Universe Batman, but he's a little more than that with his mystical connections and Egyptian mythos underneath the character and his multiple identities. He's cool, and obviously with the show of late, he's gotten a lot of attention, and rightfully so. It's a good show. This is a fun story to revisit, in part because of that. You're wasting your time and mine. You cannot beat the Shroud. Great straight-on panel there where the Shroud's fist seemingly comes out of the darkness and cracks him from behind. Nor can you escape my wrath. The Shroud, in addition to his mastery of the dark force and the shadows that he can summon, is a highly skilled martial artist trained in Asia some years ago. And I believe he is also blind, but he can see with some kind of extrasensory perception. Moon Knight thinks as he's getting clobbered. My strength waxes and wanes with the phases of the moon. Fortunately, there was that full moon tonight. Otherwise, this Shroud character would have put me away with that first punch. He seemed to be everywhere, and I couldn't lay a hand on him. I could barely see him. So Moon Knight reaches back into his pouch here, his bag of tricks, and he throws something to a magnesium flare to kind of even the playing field a bit. A self-igniting magnesium flare that Hawkeye added to my personal arsenal. I figured the glare would show me where the Shroud was and blind him enough to make him an easy caller. I was only half right. The light was enough to make me blink, and I'd been expecting it, but it didn't seem to faze the Shroud at all. What's more, the flare faded prematurely. So he doesn't know it, but the Shroud is blind, so the flare is not going to affect his sight in any way because he doesn't have it. He relies on a mystical sight. And the Shroud controls darkness, so he was able to prematurely end the flare's glow. So, almost as if the darkness was overwhelming it. I knew that if I was going to lay my hands on the Shroud, it was now or never. So in this next fateful panel, he gets a hold of the Shroud's cape and grabs him. Don't go slipping back into the shadows just yet, Shroud. You and I have things to discuss. Great panel here. He snatches his cape, then springs forward with the cape in his hands and flips the Shroud over, stunning him against the ground, and now he's pinned him. You knew my name, even though it's not exactly a household word in these parts. Did Russell set me up? Did he? You're a persistent man, Moon Knight, the Shroud says as he's caught in a superhumanly strong chokehold. And he uses his martial arts training to turn the tables. But it takes more than persistence to win the day. I'd never seen anyone slip out of a chokehold like that. He was out and in control of the situation before I could stop him. The Shroud had moves I hadn't seen anywhere this side of the Orient, and he knew how to use them. I will teach you to respect the hand of darkness. He lays a punch on him again. Sorry, I'm a slow learner, Moon Knight quips as he kicks Shroud back. Then Shroud grabs a candelabra and smacks him with it. The fight continues. He struck back with the first thing he could lay his hands on. Not that it did him much good. A candle? You hit me with a candle? That's when I really lost my temper. I'm tired of this nonsense, Shroud. It's over. So he uses his cape here cleverly to tie the Shroud up. I was sure I had the upper hand this time, but then the room turned black as pitch. Even in my stranglehold, the Shroud still controlled the darkness. I had to break his control somehow. That did it. The dark melted. So when he throws him against this wall, the shot to the head stuns the Shroud enough that his darkness fades. And I found myself facing the weirdest bunch I've ever seen. Moon Knight, meet the Night Shift, the Shroud says as he gets to his feet. Cool group of menacing silhouettes here. One less so here, moving forward, looks to be Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, and it is. Night Shift was a good name for this crew. They looked like they'd stepped out of somebody's nightmare. And Russell, my buddy, the werewolf, was at the head of the pack. I began to regret coming here on my own. So here we have one of the very underused and cool villain slash maybe anti-hero teams in the Marvel Universe. The Shroud's group, the Night Shift. We have the Brothers Grimm, Jack Russell, the werewolf. I think this guy's TikTok. He has some kind of ability to predict the near future. Gypsy Moth, an old Spider-Woman villain. Tatterdemalion, also a Spider-Woman villain. The Needle, the Digger, Frankenstein-looking guy. And another wielder of the Dark Force, I think Dance Macabre. So, before things can escalate any further, the Moon Knight has accounted for himself very well, my friends. There is no need for any further testing on our part. You may go. I don't believe it. There's a full moon. Russell should be wilder than a bag of bobcats. He's under the control of the lady with the swirling sashes. Her dance can be quite entrancing. You're saying Russell is your puppet? Then you used him to lure me here? Not at all. The werewolf joined my band of his own free will. He's quite grateful that we can keep his curse in check. As a matter of fact, it was on his suggestion that I decided to hold this initiation rite. He was right. You'd make an excellent addition to the night shift. The obstacle course or battle, our battle, it was all a test? As I stood there dumbfounded, the shroud told me how his role as a crime lord was an elaborate charade he devised to attack the underworld from within. You're serious about this? Do you really want me to join? But I just joined the Avengers. Hawkeye's West Coast squad. Yes, I know. They offered me membership once, but I turned them down. That was way back in the West Coast Avengers Limited Series #1. We're night people, you and I. Being an Avenger is a day job. You're out of your element there. Interesting take there from the Shroud. I couldn't back out on the Avengers now. Besides, your group is larger than the Avengers. You don't need me. I was looking for someone to take my place as leader. Ha! No thanks now. Now, I did have a purpose in coming here. I know. Van Lunt. I've already put the word out through my people. If he's anywhere in the valley, I'll find him within 24 hours. Once I have a fix on him, you'll be the first to know. You have the word of the Shroud. Thanks, Moon Knight says as he gets ready to leave, grabbing the ladder to his chopper. It's okay. You owe me one for tonight. As I activated my copter's autopilot to take me out of there, I made a mental note to check the Avengers' files for everything they held on the Shroud. Why? Maybe I didn't buy his story 100%. Maybe I'm too old and cynical to believe anyone can be that big a Boy Scout. And maybe I just didn't trust someone who's even more a creature than night than I am. The end. Nice little battle. Cool setup for the battle. Great that we got to see the night shift, even in just a brief cameo. I'd like to cover some issues on the show featuring them more fully so we get to kind of see them in action. I think there's a few Captain America issues we can look at, and I'll dig around for a few others. But that has been Solo Avengers #3, and this has been Scott Reed's Comics, another episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll be back with more soon.